In the heart of the highlands, where red dust danced beneath bare feet and palm trees swayed like gossiping women, lay the village of Ndongwe. It was a place wrapped in the soft hush of early mornings and the laughter of market women as they laid out their yams, dried fish, and shea butter in neat rows. The air always smelled of roasted maize, warm earth, and the smoky perfume of firewood. Ndongwe was no ordinary village. Elders said its soil was blessed by the gods, for everything grew there: cassava as thick as a grown man's arm, plantains sweet enough to shame honey, and people whose spirits glowed like the morning sun. But among them all, there was one who shined the brightest. Her name was Asena. She was a woman the village could never forget, not just because of her looks, though her beauty often made grown men forget their own wives. No, it was the way she moved. Like she carried a secret the wind longed to hear. Asena had skin the color of roasted kola nut, smooth and radiant as if bathed in moonlight every night. Her hair, though always wrapped in patterned cloth, gave hints of its coily fullness. And her eyes, her eyes. They gleamed like two polished cowries kissed by river light. Her smile. It could silence a room or start a riot, but it wasn't her beauty that made her a legend. It was her hands. Those hands could turn the wildest tangles into flowing braids, tight coils into elegant crowns, and dry, stubborn strands into silk. Some villagers whispered that her fingers had been blessed by Mawu, the spirit of creation itself. Others claimed she was a river goddess in disguise. All anyone knew was this: if Asena touched your head, you left feeling transformed. Her braid house sat at the far end of the Ndongwe marketplace, near the old fig tree, where birds gathered every dusk. The building was simple: round clay walls, a thatched roof, and wooden shutters painted in tribal spirals of red, white, and gold. A low wooden door creaked when opened, as if it too sighed in awe of her. Inside, the scent of coconut oil mixed with lemongrass lingered in the air. Wooden stools lined the walls, and a large calabash stood by the door, filled with fresh water for guests to rinse their hands. Bright fabric swatches hung from the ceiling like festival flags, and soft humming always floated from the back room, Asena's lullabies as she worked. But there was one strange thing about Asena's braid house. There were no mirrors, not a single shard, not a polished bowl, not even a small reflective stone. At first, the women of Ndongwe were confused. "How will I know if I look good?" one trader had grumbled the first time she sat in Asena's chair. "How can I see the style you've done for me?" Another had frowned, craning her neck in vain. Asena always answered with a gentle voice, the kind that smoothed over anger like palm oil on a hot pan. "You don't need to see," she would say. "You will feel it. And that is what truly matters." Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. But when she was done and their fingers brushed their freshly braided heads, when they stepped outside and felt people stop to admire them, every doubt vanished. Even without mirrors, the women left smiling, their necks straight, their steps lighter than air. Word spread faster than wildfire in Harmattan season. "Go to Asena," people said. "She'll make you feel like a queen." And they came, from neighboring villages, from across rivers, even from the capital on rare days. Women waited from sunrise to sundown, sitting on stones and stools outside her braid house. Some brought roasted groundnuts to share, others sang old lullabies to pass the time. It didn't matter how tired Asena was. If your name was on her list, she would braid your hair, but with all the admiration came whispers. "Who is she really?" an old woman once asked by the well. "No family, no husband, no history. She just appeared one day," said another, "like morning mist." Indeed, no one in Ndongwe knew where Asena had come from. One day the braid house was just there, painted and open. She never spoke of her past. She never joined village dances. She never visited other salons. Her world was her work, and she guarded it with quiet pride. Among the other hairdressers, resentment brewed like oversteeped herbs. Before Asena arrived, Zalika had been the crown jewel of village stylists. Her fingers were quick, her prices fair, and her gossip sharp enough to slice yam. But now, her chairs sat empty, and the flies buzzed louder than the women. "She thinks she's better than us," Zalika hissed one afternoon. staring daggers at the line of women outside Asena's door. "Just because she's pretty," another salon owner muttered. "She believes she owns the village." Their bitterness turned into rumors. "You notice she never sweats?" someone whispered near the pepper stall. "She walks like she floats, like she's not even real. I heard her braid house has no mirrors because her reflection is cursed." The rumors slithered through the village like snakes in tall grass. Still, Asena remained unbothered. She greeted every woman with warmth. She sang softly as she worked, and though she heard the murmurs, she never changed. Even the queen heard of her. Queen Mawusi was known for her love of elegance. Her silk wrappers shimmered in the sun, and her golden anklets rang with every step. When word reached her of the miraculous hair artist who used no mirrors, she was intrigued. "Bring her to me," the queen said, and so Asena found herself walking through the grand stone archway of the palace, guided by guards dressed in fine indigo. The air was thick with incense. Drums played softly in the distance. Asena walked slowly, humbly, but without fear. Inside the queen's court, golden cushions lay scattered like sunspots. Queen Mawusi, tall and radiant, sat on her throne wrapped in fine kente cloth. Her eyes scanned Asena like a hawk watching prey. "So," she said, her voice cool, "you are the girl who does magic with hair." Asena bowed. "I only do what my hands allow, Your Majesty." The queen raised an eyebrow. "And why do you hide mirrors from your customers?" Asena met her gaze. "Because a mirror shows only the surface, Your Majesty. But I work on what lies beneath." Queen Mawusi said nothing. But when Asena finished styling her hair, the queen stood up, turned slowly in place, and touched her head. She smiled. "You may return to your braid house, but I will call for you again." That night, Queen Mawusi looked into her large bronze mirror and saw something unsettling, not in her appearance but in her heart. She envied Asena, the commoner with quiet power. Asena, whose hands shaped not just hair but confidence. Asena, who needed no palace, no jewels, only faith in her gift. And so, the seed of jealousy was planted. Back in Ndongwe, Asena rose before the roosters, sweeping her braid house with a straw broom made by her own hands. She laid out her combs, oils, and threads, arranging them like sacred tools. And when the sun peeked over the hills, she was already humming, ready for another day, but not everything felt the same. The women who once greeted her with joy now offered only tight smiles. Their feet shuffled nervously as they sat down, their eyes darted away when she looked at them too long, and when she gently asked, "Sister, what troubles your heart today?" They only shook their heads and forced a laugh, but their silence was heavier than truth. And Asena, though calm on the outside, could feel something shifting. The village of Ndongwe whispered in ways that drums could not drown out. It was nearing dusk one day when it happened. The sun had just begun its descent, painting the skies in shades of orange, rose, and gold. Asena stood at the door of her braid house, wiping her hands with a piece of cloth soaked in scented water. She was about to close up when the ground began to tremble softly. Hoofbeats echoed across the market, square like thunder approaching. Heads turned, women froze mid-conversation. Children stopped playing with stones. A royal carriage rolled into view, its body carved from mahogany wood and adorned with lion-shaped gold. Purple cloth, trimmed with cowrie shells, flowed from its sides. The horses were dressed in silver, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with pride. Gasps spread like wind through dry grass. Queen Mawusi had come, not sent for Asena, not summoned her to the palace. No, the queen had left her throne and come to the braid house herself. Villagers stepped back as the carriage stopped. The doors swung open, and out stepped Queen Mawusi, tall and gleaming like a blade pulled from fire. Her robe, woven from rare Tedwali silk, brushed the earth as she walked. Her crown glinted beneath the last rays of sunlight. Asena's breath caught in her chest, but she moved with grace, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty," she said, keeping her gaze low. "This humble house is honored by your steps." The queen offered a smile, but her eyes were sharp like the edge of a broken gourd. "I have a special gathering tonight," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "And I want my hair to speak before I even enter the room. Only you can do that, Asena. So I've come." Asena bowed again. "Please, Your Majesty, the seat is yours." Inside the braid house, the queen walked slowly, her eyes scanning the space with disdain. The dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the floor swept clean but simple, the colorful fabric nailed across the windows, the air rich with coconut oil and lemongrass, and then the glaring absence. No mirrors, not even a small reflective plate, just woven baskets and folded wrappers. Queen Mawusi sat, but not without a sneer. "You still haven't hung a mirror?" she asked, placing her hands on her knees like she owned even the stool beneath her. Asena began parting the queen's thick hair with care, dipping her fingers into warm shea butter. Her hands were steady, but her heart had begun to whisper warnings. "I have no mirrors, Your Majesty," she replied gently. The queen tilted her head slightly. "I've heard your reasons, but I find them strange. How can my subjects admire your work if they can't see it?" Asena took a deep breath, pressing her palm against the queen's scalp as she moved. "When the soul feels beautiful," she said, "the body will walk in beauty. I do not shape what they see, I awaken what they carry." The queen chuckled bitterly. "That's a poet's excuse. But I am no village girl. I am the queen of Ndongwe. I do not wait to feel beautiful. I demand it." She turned slightly. "Bring me a mirror." The braid house went quiet. Even the oil in the clay lamp seemed to stop bubbling. Asena's chest tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. There is no mirror here, and even if there was, I would not place it in your hand." Queen Mawusi's smile vanished. Her eyes became sharp, cold, and still. "Are you refusing your queen?" "I am refusing no one," Asena said softly, "but I will not break the one rule that holds my gift." Silence thundered louder than drums. The queen stood abruptly, her stool falling backward with a clatter. She faced Asena, and her voice rose like lightning in a storm. "Do you know who I am?" she shouted. "I could end your name with a breath. Have you lost your mind, girl?" Villagers outside peeked through the open doorway, breath caught in their throats. Asena bowed slightly, her voice calm even though her fingers trembled. "I know who you are, Your Majesty, and I respect your crown. But this is the boundary. I cannot cross. Not for a king, not for a god, not even for you." Queen Mawusi's nostrils flared. Her hands clenched at her sides. "You will regret this insolence," she said through gritted teeth. "You dare defy me in front of your dirty stools and herbs?" She turned, her robe sweeping dust into the air as she stormed out. The silence outside cracked like dry ground beneath her steps. No one spoke. Not a single tongue dared to move as she climbed into her carriage. Then the whip cracked, and the carriage rolled away. Asena stood in her doorway, heart pounding. The air around her braid house was heavy, like a storm about to break. She glanced at the villagers. Some stared, others looked away, pretending to be busy with their wraps and baskets. The queen's fury had planted something in their hearts, something cold. That night, the whispers grew louder. "No one has ever disobeyed the queen like that. She must think too highly of herself. Who is she to say no to power?" And from that moment forward, Queen Mawusi's anger did not rest. Every morning, as she sat before her bronze mirror brushing oils into her skin, her reflection reminded her of the insult. Every time she touched her hair, she remembered Asena's soft defiance. It festered. In the palace garden, she gossiped with her ladies-in-waiting, dropping words like venom. "That hair witch in the market," she'd say, loud enough for all to hear, "has strange habits, doesn't let anyone see their face. You know, I've never seen her family. Perhaps she has none." The court women nodded quickly, eager to please. "She must be hiding something," one added. "Perhaps her beauty is only a spell," whispered another. The queen smiled, satisfied. It did not take long for the stories to spread. The same women, who once praised Asena's hands, now began to avoid her path in the market. Traders who used to offer her mangoes with a grin now looked past her, as if she were a shadow. The children still waved, but their mothers pulled them close. "Stay away from her door," they said under their breath. And the other stylists, especially Zalika, were watching. Zalika, whose bitterness had grown teeth, smiled as her braid house slowly filled again. She offered free cowrie beads, told jokes loudly, and watched Asena's line shrink day by day. Inside her hut, Asena lit a small clay lamp, sat cross-legged, and pressed her palms together. "I have done no wrong," she whispered to the flame. I held my truth. Why does it cost so much? But she didn't cry. She rose early as always. She swept her floor, she oiled her combs, she tied her wrapper tight, and she sang. Even when only one woman came, even when people crossed the street to avoid her, even when she braided in silence. But Queen Mawusi was not finished. She was still stewing in the insult Asina had served her. The queen had never been denied before. Not by a trader, not by a soldier, and certainly not by a hairdresser. Yet Asina, with her calm eyes and slow voice, had stood like a tree in the storm, refusing her command to bring forth a mirror. That defiance echoed in the queen's mind like her drumbeat that would not fade. Later that afternoon, Queen Mawusi draped herself in pale green robes, softened her tone, and walked gracefully to her husband's chambers. King Obadele, wise and weathered like the baobab, was sitting beneath the canopy sipping bitter cola tea. When he saw his wife approach, he nodded. "My queen," he said. "What burdens you today?" Mawusi sighed sweetly, as if she were merely troubled by the weight of her crown. "Husband, I must bring something to your attention, a matter that touches the respect of our throne." He placed his cup down. She began. "There is a woman in the marketplace, a stylist. Asina, they call her. You may have heard the name." The king nodded. "I have. The one who refuses to use mirrors." "Yes," she said, lowering her eyes with just enough sadness to stir sympathy. "She shamed me, in front of villagers, refused to obey me in my own kingdom. If we allow such disrespect, others will follow. I believe she must be sent away from Ndongwe." The king did not speak right away. He sat back, watching the breeze move through the silk banners on the walls. Obadel had heard tales of Asena, her discipline, her humility, and the women who left her braid house glowing with newfound confidence. He also knew of her mirror rule. And more importantly, he knew his wife's pride was sharp and easily bruised. "She is not dangerous," he said quietly, "only committed to her way." "She defied you," Mawusi pressed. "She held to her belief," the king corrected. "And you knew her rule before you visited." The queen's face tightened, but she said nothing. "I will not banish a woman for standing in her truth," the king said gently but firmly. "If you no longer wish to sit in her chair, find another, but she will not be removed." Queen Mawusi stood still, her nails digging into her palm. Behind her soft smile a storm brewed. That night her anger spread like fire in dry grass. She whispered to her maidservants. She stirred suspicions in the ears of noblewomen. "A woman who hides faces," she said, "is surely hiding something more." Soon the rumors spilled from the palace and rolled downhill into the marketplace. "Asina has no family," someone said near the millet stand. "She won't let anyone look in mirrors because she fears her true reflection," whispered another. "She might be a spirit," a mother murmured, clutching her child's hand. By morning the whispers had taken root. People grew uneasy. Feet that once marched eagerly to Asena's braid house now wandered toward the other stylists. Her mornings, once filled with laughter and chatter, became quieter. The woven stool by her door sat empty longer. Still, Asena did not crumble. She rose with the sun. She swept her floor. She lit incense of dried lemongrass, and when the rare woman walked through her door, she welcomed her with a smile that held no bitterness. But the change in the air was undeniable. Zalika, the one who had once been the star of Ndongwe's stylists, now watched with sharp eyes and growing satisfaction. "She thinks she's special?" Zalika muttered under her breath. "Let's see how long that pride keeps her standing." Her own braid house now hummed with life again. Villagers who once praised Asena returned to Zalika's chair, drawn by fear and curiosity. But not all. Hearts were convinced. Though Asena's visitors had grown few, those who still came whispered afterward to others, "Her touch, it's still the same, like warm rain in dry season." And slowly, the silence around Asena began to crack. The queen noticed. Her face darkened each time she heard Asena's name again. How can people return to her? Mawusi said to herself one morning, pacing in her chamber. After all I've done, and they still go to her. Her hatred twisted inward, and the deeper it went, the more dangerous it became, but Asena stood unmoved, even as her braid house became lonelier, even as her coins grew fewer, even as the sun set on days where no one came at all. She refused to bow to the queen's fury. Then one night, beneath a sky filled with stars and moonlight, Zalika walked barefoot to a small mud hut on the edge of the forest. Inside, sitting cross-legged before a clay bowl of bones and ash, was Old Man Tando, the village's native doctor. His face was wrinkled like river stones. His eyes held secrets no child should hear. Zalika sat down, bitterness dripping from every word. "She has stolen everything," she said. "Even now people flock to her. There is no explanation, unless she uses dark powers." Old Man Tando listened in silence. After a pause, he said, "There are ways to test such power." Zalika leaned forward. "You will go before the morning rooster," he said. "Take your urine, sprinkle it at her door. If she works with spirits, the bond will break." Zalika blinked. "Just that?" "Just that," he whispered. "And no one must see you." The next night, with a clay pot in her hands, Zalika crept through the sleeping village. The moon watched in silence as she crouched by Asena's door and poured the contents of her pot along the threshold. She whispered a curse under her breath. "May your charm break. May your hands grow cold." Then she vanished like a shadow. But dawn came, and with it, so did the people. Asena's door creaked open, her smile still as gentle as river mist. Women lined up again, some new, some old. Laughing, chatting, asking for twists, braids, and thread. Zalika watched from her window, her face carved with fury. The spell had done nothing. Old Man Tando's trick had failed. Asena's light still burned. That day, Zalika tore at her own hair in frustration. Her envy, once small like a thorn, had grown into a choking vine around her soul. But fate was not finished. That week, a royal decree echoed through Ndongwe. Prince Ekong had returned. The king's only son, sharp-eyed and strong, had completed his studies in a distant land and come home bearing knowledge and a heart full of questions. The village buzzed with excitement. Flags were hung. Drummers beat until the air trembled. King Obadele, overjoyed, declared a celebration, a feast of unity and homecoming. Only a few were invited from outside the palace. Asena was among them. Queen Mawusi clenched her jaw, but said nothing. It was not the time for arguments, not with guests arriving and joy bubbling in the air. That night, under lanterns strung like stars, Asena entered the courtyard wearing a dress of deep indigo with golden embroidery, her head wrap tied like a queen's. Her calm presence drew every eye. She did not seek attention, and yet she received it. From across the courtyard, Prince Ekong saw her, and he stared. She wasn't just beautiful. She glowed with something he couldn't explain, like she carried light behind her eyes. And the way she moved, not with pride but with peace. After the celebration, he found himself thinking only of her. That night, beneath a moon that glowed like a silver drum in the sky, Prince Ekong sat with his father in the royal garden, the E. Sounds of crickets singing in the bush beyond the palace walls. The prince's eyes were restless. His hands twisted the gold thread that lined his sleeve. "Baba," he said, "there's something I need to speak of." King Obadele raised his brow. "Your tongue is heavy tonight, my son. Let it be light." The prince leaned forward. "It's about Asena." The king smiled softly. He had expected this. "I admire her," Ekong continued. "More than I've ever admired anyone. The way she carries herself, the quiet pride, the grace, it's not just her gift, it's her spirit." The king nodded. "She is unlike most." He sipped his palm wine and looked toward the shadows of the trees. She rose without help. She stood tall when others would have bowed. I have seen how the women leave her braid house taller than they entered. I respect her. The prince's face brightened, but the king raised a hand gently. "There are things you must consider. Her past is a locked door. No one knows from which village she comes or who her family is. That alone is enough to stir unease." Ekong nodded slowly, and then the king added, "There is her mirror rule. She denies what every woman holds dear, the right to see her beauty. Even your mother cannot understand it, and you know well how deeply Queen Mawusi despises her." Prince clenched his jaw. Mother's pride is not my compass. Obadeli studied him carefully. If you walk this path, walk it with your eyes open. Do not tell your mother yet. Learn Asena's story, know her heart, then decide. Ikong bowed his head. I will. The next morning the sun broke through the clouds like a chorus of drums. The prince dressed simply, wearing no crown or sash. He walked through the market like an ordinary man and arrived at Asena's braid house just as she was sweeping the floor. She looked up, surprised, but bowed gently. My prince, she said softly. Today, I am only Ikong, he replied. He said nothing more. That first visit he watched as she twisted an old woman's hair into neat rows. He listened as she sang softly, her voice wrapping around the space like incense. He said little, and she asked even less. But the next day, he came again, and again after that. Sometimes he brought roasted cashews, sometimes wildflowers. Once he carried a hand-carved stool as a gift for her guests, and over time something unspoken began to grow between them. A warmth that wasn't rushed, a thread that wove itself tighter with each visit. They talked about everything except their feelings. The village noticed, of course, but no one dared question the prince's choices. They only whispered in corners and exchanged looks whenever Ikong stepped into the braid house, all except one. Zalika. Her jealousy had bloomed into something venomous. She had already tried whispers, rumors, even magic through old man Tando. But now to see the prince, the future king, walking into Asena's hut day after day, it was too much. One evening, as the skies darkened and oil lamps flickered in the market stalls, Zalika tied her wrapper tight and stormed toward the palace gates. The guards raised their spears, but lowered them when they saw her face. I bring news the queen must hear, she hissed. Queen Mawusi was brushing her hair before her mirror, her fingers moving slowly through thick coils. Her reflection scowled back at her. My queen, Zalika said, bowing low. Mawusi didn't look away from the mirror. Speak. It's Asena, Zalika said, voice trembling with false pity. She has taken hold of your son. They see each other every day. The prince, he is in love with her. The queen's brush stopped mid-stroke. She turned slowly. What did you say? Zalika repeated herself, this time with even more poison. The queen's face turned cold, like river stone in winter. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply said, Summon my son. That night, Prince Ikong stood in the great hall before his mother, his arms folded across his chest. I have heard troubling things, Mawusi began. Ikong met her gaze. Then ask me, not others. She stood from her throne, her robe trailing behind her like smoke. Is it true that you spend your days with that village stylist? Yes. And you love her? He did not flinch. Yes. The queen's nostrils flared. She is not suitable. You know nothing of her people. She hides her past like a snake hides in tall grass. And she disrespected me in my own kingdom. She stood by her truth, Ikong replied, and that is more than I can say for many in this court. The queen stepped forward, eyes gleaming. You will end this. No, Ikong said calmly. I will not. His voice was like stone. Queen Mawusi was stunned. Her son had never raised his voice, never once defied her so clearly. She turned away, silent, but her silence was louder than a scream. Meanwhile, Zalika stood by the gate, watching the palace lights. She had hoped the queen would crush Asena with a single word, but now she wasn't so sure. Still, she wasn't finished. Days later, filled with new desperation, Zalika returned to old man Tando's hut. She brought coins, beads, even a small goat as offering. I want something stronger, she said. I want the prince to forget Asena and fall in love with me instead. Old man Tando shook his head. No charm can shift the heart if it is truly anchored, he said. There are powers guarding that girl. Her bond with the prince was woven. Long before they met, Zalika's mouth dropped. You mean I can't break it? The old man looked at her, eyes heavy with truth. You can spend your life trying, but it will only twist your soul. Some fates are sealed by the spirits. Zalika stumbled out of the hut, her feet weak, her vision blurry. Everything she had wanted, Asena had it. and there was nothing she could. But the storm was not over. Prince Ekong, despite his growing feelings for Asena, began to feel a heaviness he could not name. He couldn't sleep. Even as the palace grew quiet and the moon hung low like a tired drum in the sky, his heart would not rest. He lay in his chamber, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of whispers that refused to leave him. No one knows where she came from. She hides faces, hides mirrors, maybe she hides something more. What if she's not even real? He had never believed gossip, but now doubt crept in like cold wind through a crack in the wall. Was Asena truly who she claimed to be? The next morning, before the sun had fully stretched across the fields of Ndongwe, Ekong dressed in plain brown cloth and made his way to her braid house. The woven mat on the door was rolled up. The clay pot by the entrance was missing, and the place, usually smelling of lemongrass and coconut oil, felt hollow. She was not there. He waited. An old woman came by and glanced at him curiously, but said nothing. Ekong rose and walked toward her home behind the baobab trees, but her house too was empty. No sound of grinding stones, no firewood stacked by the doorway, no footprints in the red sand. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Troubled, the prince returned to the palace. Queen Mawusi saw him pacing the marble floor of the courtyard, his face carved with unease. "She's gone, isn't she?" she said, her voice low and smooth. Ekong paused. "How do you know that?" The queen folded her hands. "Because I told you, spirits come and go as they please. Perhaps she's vanished now that she's had her fill of our village." There was no gloating in her tone, only quiet certainty, a certainty that twisted in Ekong's chest like thorns. Still, a small voice in his heart whispered, "Wait." The next day, just as the market drums began to beat for noon, Asena returned. She stood at the doorway of the palace courtyard, wrapped in a blue kitenge patterned with white spirals. Her face was calm, but her eyes held concern. A guard announced her name. Prince Ekong came to the entrance, his steps hurried and stiff. She bowed her head. "I heard what's been said. I came to speak." They moved to the quiet garden behind the palace. Wind moved softly through the tall grasses and a distant dove cooed from the trees. Ekong faced her, his voice tense. "Where were you?" "I came to your braid house. I went to your home. You were gone. No word, no sign. People are saying—" "I know," she said gently. "And I'm sorry." She took a deep breath. "I went to Okanje, the neighboring village, to gather fresh herbs and oils. My supplier there had new seeds from the coast. I left early, thinking I'd be back by sunset. But rain came hard and roads were blocked. I couldn't return in time." "You should have told me," he said, not angrily, but with the ache of someone afraid. "I should have," she nodded. "It won't happen again." She looked up at him. "Do you believe me?" He looked into her eyes for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I do." The next morning, the prince came again to her braid house, but this time there was no hesitation. As she oiled his hands with warm shea butter, part of a welcome gesture, he turned to her and said, "Asena, I want to marry you." She looked at him, startled but not surprised. "I've thought of nothing else," he said. "But before we take this step, I must know your story, the real one, all of it." She nodded, already prepared. She placed her hand on her heart and began. "I am not from Ndongwe," she said. "I was born in the kingdom of Nsayo, far beyond the rivers where the crocodiles sleep with open eyes. My mother was Queen Mirembe. My father ruled but gently, with books and drums rather than swords. I was meant to be a doctor. They sent me abroad to study, but it did not rest. My hands did not seek scalpels. They longed for strands of hair, for twist and thread, for the rhythm of combs and oils." Her eyes shimmered. "It was my grandmother, Wura, the village hair whisperer, who gave me the gift. She said it ran in our blood. She warned me never to use mirrors while braiding. They steal what comes from the spirit," she told me. "So I left, against my family's wishes. I journeyed far. I arrived here, in Ndongwe, alone, and I began again." Ekong listened with quiet awe. "You're not a ghost," he whispered. "I'm many things," she said with a faint smile. "But not that," he laughed, relief washing over him. "Then I must speak to your people," she nodded. They will be surprised. And so, within 3 days, Prince Ikong rode to Nsayo with a small delegation. When Asena's parents, now older, wiser, softer, saw the prince, they were astonished. But when they heard his words, saw the sincerity in his eyes, and listened to the care in his voice, they smiled. Asena's mother, her grey head wrapped in indigo cloth, held the prince's hand and said, "If your heart sees our daughter clearly, then you see what matters." Her father, once stern, now simply said, "Welcome, son." The wedding was planned. Drummers from Nsayo and flutists from Ndongwe gathered. The queen's resistance was still hard as stone until Ikong sat her down and told her everything. "Mother," he said, "she is not a danger. She is royalty. She chose her gift, and she chose to walk it humbly. Isn't that what you wanted in a daughter?" Queen Mawusi sat in silence. Then she rose and left the room. The next morning she sent word to Asena, "I would like to speak." In the private chambers of the queen they sat across from each other, 2 women bound by pride and legacy. "I was wrong about you," Mawusi admitted at last. "I let fear wear the mask of power." Asena bowed her head. "I understand." The queen reached forward, touched her hand, and for the first time smiled with softness. "Welcome to the family, child." The wedding was held beneath the oldest Iroko tree in the village square. Cloths of every color hung from branches like fruit. The air was thick with the scent of roasted yam, palm wine, and fried plantain. Women danced barefoot in the dust. Children chased each other through the crowds. Drums rolled like thunder, and ululations soared like birds into the sky. Asena wore a dress sewn with golden thread, symbols of her grandmother Wura woven into the back. Prince Ekong wore a robe dyed with indigo and ash, the crest of both kingdoms stitched at the hem. When the king placed their hands together and the queen tied a silk band around their wrists, the crowd erupted in joy. Zalika watched from a distance. She had braided no hair that day. No one had asked for her. She stood with arms folded, a bitter seed still stuck in her throat. But even she could not deny the sight before her was beautiful. Days turned to weeks, and the braid house of Asena did. Not close. But now it became more than a place of beauty. It became a sanctuary. Women came not only for hair but for advice, for tears, for laughter, for silence. And Prince Ekong? He often sat beside the door, helping grind shea nuts or sweep the floor, wearing no crown but holding all the dignity of one who serves love without shame. Even Queen Mawusi came one day. She did not sit for braids, but she sat, and when she stood to leave, she touched Asena's shoulder and said, "I see you now." Asena only smiled, because that was all she ever needed. In a world that often values what the eyes can see, Asena taught us that true beauty begins in the soul. She showed that staying true to your purpose, even when misunderstood, is the greatest form of strength. Jealousy fades, but character endures, and no matter how dark the lies around you may grow, as light, when steady, always shines through. If this story moved you, taught you something, or reminded you of your own strength, give it a thumbs up, share your favorite moment in the comments, subscribe for more powerful African tales every week, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that speaks to your heart. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, and stay true to who you are.